Anup, say something. Abhishek, more kuchilo tumhar here. You can ask one or two questions later on because
yes.
So the topic will focus on film festivals, and
Okay.
And Professor DINA will also refer to Indian cinema. So you as a young filmmaker, say I'm a young filmmaker, so I want to know how the whole the process, because how we can take our films to the International Film Festival. So is there any specific rules in the film festival? So this is, I'm just giving you some ideas that you can think of your own.
Okay. I will ask this question.
Okay. Tumaluke baki rest of the student, tumaluke take your pen and notebook. Tumaluke notebook loi lua jate kiba likhi point bilak Professor DINA Iordanova তেওঁ কৈ গলে যাতে কিছুমান পইণ্ট তোমালোকে লিখিব পাৰা। Connecting to audio দেখাই আছে অনুপ। পল্লৱী পৰা ট্ৰাই কৰাচোন নহলে। অডিওটো পোৱা নাই।
আপুনি শুনিছেনে এতিয়া?
Oh yes, oh, it's loud and clear.
Oh sir, then fine.
Where is the problem?
Sorry, নাজানো কি হৈছিলে।
So you just put mute and unmute button over.
Yes sir, that is what I did. Just a second, sir.
You have been struggling a lot. Just I have noticed that you have been struggling for long. But humai gol DINA বাইদেউ humai gol.
Humaise no? Acha.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I am delighted to see so many people waiting already here. I thought I was the first.
Yeah.
But thank you for the invitation, and I'm prepared to spend some time with you talking about festivals.
That's great. Well, we are eagerly and excitedly waiting for your lecture.
Yes, it's going to be improvised. I just prepared some notes, and I will be just talking, nothing.
Yeah, that's great.
I can make it more formal, but there is no need.
That's a good idea to become more informal.
Yes.
It's just we have 2 minutes left to be 6 exactly, so we'll be starting.
So where are you guys physically? Are you all in Assam?
Yeah, that's why I'm here in Assam.
Yes, in which city are you?
Pardon?
In which city are you?
Yeah, called Nagaon, N-A-G-A-O-N, Nagaon, N-A-G-A-O-N.
Because I'll be checking afterwards to imagine how it was on Earth.
Nearby my hometown, there was the Kaziranga National Park. Once you visit and once you come, you haven't been in India in some places, right?
I have only been, to my shame, only one time to India.
Which
so
place?
I have only been to Madras and Pondicherry, this area in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
But I do know quite a bit of, about India because I have many Indian friends who are all in the diaspora,
Okay.
and I have seen many Indian movies. So I'm one of the Western people who I don't live on Indian movies because obviously I watch many other things. But unlike most other people, I do watch some Indian movies. So usually every year I watch between 10 and 20 films from India.
Okay.
It's not much, but at least kind of like, and I always teach Indian cinema, so
Yeah.
usually I know.
Yeah.
And I actually do know a filmmaker from Assam,
And
Bobby
Bobby,
Sharma
Baruah.
Baruah,
Yeah, yeah, she's a good friend of mine.
who I met at a film festival in Dhaka, more
Okay.
probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I had never had a chance to see any of her films, so I do know of her work and she's very active, but have not seen her films really.
Yeah, she has recently made one film. It is in the post production. So most of her films are woman oriented.
Yes, so hopefully I will get a chance to see
But I'm
it.
just giving one brief idea. You have been in a place called Madras or Chennai, and if you look at the map of India, then you'll find the northeast or Assam. So it's culturally, linguistically, quite socially, quite completely different. You'll
I
find,
know. Yes, go ahead.
yeah,
Go on, Parthajit.
yeah. It's okay. What I wanted to say. That if you visit my place, then you'll find the cultural, linguistic, and social difference from rest of the country. And if you places called Kerala, Adur Gopala Krishnan's the place, and if you go to Mumbai, then you'll find the whole dynamic of the Indian culture.
Yes, so hopefully I also go to Kerala. But of course, yes, I know that Assam is quite different and geographically also the position is very interesting. And I very much would like to visit. And I used to have a colleague at the University of St. Andrews, Dennis Hanlon,
Yeah.
who I know had traveled to Assam at some point.
Okay.
I also know people who are from Nagaland. So
Yeah.
I do have an idea about
Okay.
India, and the friends with who I actually visited in Pondicherry, they are filmmakers who had made a film shot mainly in Nagaland. I met them at the Yamagata Film Festival in Japan.
Yeah.
Anushka Meenakshi and Ishwar Lalita is now his name.
Yeah.
And they had made this fantastic documentary about agricultural labor in Nagaland. So yes, I do know, yes.
Okay. So I think, Professor DINA, we should start formally the session.
Yes, please, let's start.
Yeah. Now I'd like to request Anup Kumar Das, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Pandu College, Assam, Northeast India, to offer the welcome speech. And he will also read out a brief bio of our resource person, Professor DINA. Over to Professor Anup Kumar Das.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you today on behalf of Sunlit Studio Film Club to this international web talk by renowned, noted academic, producer, and film critic, Professor DINA Iordanova. She is here to deliver a much anticipated talk on film festivals in Indian context. It is indeed an honor and privilege to introduce and welcome Professor DINA Iordanova amongst all of us. Let me try to briefly mention snippet of Professor Iordanova's illustrious and vast career. DINA Iordanova is a professor of film studies at the University of St. Andrews, Scotland, and she is the founder of the Center for Film Studies and the publishing house St. Andrews Film Studies, the activities of which she currently directs. A specialist in world cinema, her special expertise is in the cinema of Balkan, Eastern Europe, and Europe in general. Her research approaches cinema on a meta-national level and focuses on the dynamics of transnational film She has a special interest in issues related to cinema at the periphery and in alternative historiography. She has published extensively on international and transnational film art and film industry, and convenes research network on film festivals and on the dynamics of world cinema. She has taught internationally and has been a distinguished visiting professor at universities in the USA and across Europe and Asia, and is a recipient of multiple Rockefeller, Leverhulme, and Carnegie Trust Awards. Her work is translated into 20 languages and is adopted in teaching curriculums around the world. Besides numerous article and book chapters, she has published 11 books focused on several key aspects of cinema. Since 2009, she has been publishing the series of film festival yearbooks, which includes volumes on the festival circuit, film festival, and imagine communities. Professor DINA Iordanova edited volume Cinema at the Periphery assembles critical writing by several authors exploring issues of the periphery in terms of location, practices, methods, and themes, including questions of transnationality, place, space, passage, and migration. Her book, New Bulgarian Cinema, discusses issues of representation, history, identity, minorities, national discourses related to this little known cinematic tradition in the period since 1989. We are really privileged to have Professor DINA Iordanova with us today. I once again extend a warm welcome to Professor DINA Iordanova, and also in this occasion I welcome all the audience and young filmmakers across the world and across the time zone. So with this, without further delay, I hand it over to Professor Parthajit Baruah, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Anup Kumar Das. You have.
And thank you very much. So shall I go ahead? I see somebody's raising a hand. Does it mean that a hand here? Poco M Pro, M2 Pro?
No, that they have. No, they have
okay.
the nickname.
So I am here sitting early afternoon in Scotland. It is a rainy day today, believe it or not, even though yesterday was beautiful. And later on today, I have other engagements. So I just wanted to say that I will be here until 7:30 your time, I believe, if it takes the moment. And then I have to rush. I have prepared several of the books which we did from the film festival series.
And the Middle East.
This is film festivals and the Middle East, which is very extensive. This is over 400 pages, which covers countries in the Middle East, but also in North Africa and so on. So this is one of the volumes. Another volume which we did, the very first volume, is the festival circuit. This is now about 10 years ago, where we first started approaching. So we were approaching academics, and we were also approaching various people involved more directly in festivals, like festival programmers, critics, and so on, because we are more typically academic. And in the West, these are very separate areas, actually. Yeah. So at first, there wasn't huge response from the film festivals, but eventually we really became privileged because the festivals understood the value of our work and wanted to contribute. Here is another book which I did, which is on film festivals and East Asia. This was published, I believe, 2011. So this is now 10 years old, even though I still think of it as yesterday. Now, when we started doing this book, it was our idea to include the whole Asian continent, meaning also the subcontinent of India, But then when we started kind of like, figuring out what is to be covered, we realized that it is just huge and we cannot do it in one book. And this is why we decided to focus on East Asia, maybe because I have been actively involved with the Busan Film Festival. I have been many times to the Hong Kong Film Festival. We had better connections. And my co-editor, Ruby Chang, she was PhD student with me from Hong Kong. So we only focused on the East Asian countries. And back then we said, maybe one day we will go back and do a book about film festival in India. But this day has simply not yet come. And in the meantime, of course, there are many people who wrote. In the various books, we do have some chapters which pertain to film festivals in India. And I do have, let's say, relatively good idea of the main festivals in India. I know Aruna Vasudev, who is a very important figure of festival movement, Rowan Chawla, kind of like different figures of NetPAC and kind of like people involved in festivals. Another one I wanted to show is the Film Festival Reader, which is an anthology of basic texts. So these are the ones I have prepared. And I also wanted to say that even though I'm not a specialist on Indian cinema, I was saying I do watch quite a bit of Indian films, and I always include Indian cinema in my teaching, even though I am originally Bulgarian. So kind of like, and I'm a specialist on Eastern Europe, but then I have lived now for more than 30 years in the West, and certainly I watch quite a bit of West European cinema. So like, I'm interested in cinema in general. So I'm trying to keep up with cinema in India. And in the year 2006, with a colleague of mine who is originally from Greece, Dimitris Eleftheiotis, professor at the University of Glasgow, also in Scotland, we co-edited a special volume of one interesting journal called Journal of Popular South Asian Studies, which is usually dealing with Indian issues, about the global presence of Indian cinema. Because from my childhood in Bulgaria, I had seen, which was at that time in the Soviet bloc, many people think that countries which were in the Soviet bloc, we only had Soviet films, which is not exactly the case. Of course, we did have Soviet films, we had films from the other communist countries, but we also had Hollywood films, selection of Hollywood films. It was not this Hollywood kind of like, droning in Hollywood stuff, which you have in the West. You barely have anything else but Hollywood. And we had many Indian films when I was a child. Maybe not so many, but kind of they were extremely popular. So this is why we compared notes with my colleague from Greece, and Greece at that time was a capitalist country, so we couldn't interact directly. But later in life, we compared notes, and he said also that he remembers from his childhood how Indian films were extremely popular. And we have one specific memory, and it turns out that this was the experience of friends in Israel, this was the experience of friends in Bosnia, friends in many other countries, because we started asking in Iran, for example, we started asking around. And everybody was saying, yes, Awara. Awara is the most famous film, and like, everybody in their childhood have seen it at least several times. So we started commissioning testimonies and memories from people from my generation who grew up in the 60s and the 70s when there was this kind of like a golden period, like, mainly for distribution of Indian cinema. Of course, Indian cinema has not stopped producing these films. And we published the findings of this study in a journal. So I have always been interested in the global dimension and global presence of Indian cinema, but this is specifically my contribution, even though now it is 13 years ago, but time is flying. So what I'd like to talk about today is film festivals, because I understand this is this was the theme suggested to me on invitation. And I have jotted down some lines. I have not prepared a formal presentation just because maybe it is more lively if I just improvise, and I believe I'm sufficiently experienced. So I have several topics which I will touch briefly, and then try to stop working and allow for questions. So I want to say a few things about general history of film festivals, and I understand you have had other guests So they may have said some of these things, especially people, I don't remember who you mentioned, but Jean-Michel Frodon is a close friend. We did a book together with him a few years back, and I was just talking to him the other day. He's in Venice Festival at the moment. Massimo Lecchi, I know. I don't remember who else you mentioned. So like, I know that people who may have said interesting things have spoken to you. Then I want to say something about how we think about the typology of festivals, because it is important, in my opinion, to understand what kind of festivals are not exactly all the same. So I'll say about the typology. I will speak about the topic of festival circuit, and then I will come to share a few things about Indian cinema in relation to the global festival. Which probably I imagine that many of you are cinephiles and aspiring filmmakers do not expect too much, because I am not able to help individually, and kind of like, I don't work for any festival, but maybe some information that I give may be of use for you. So to say about history of festivals, what is very important to understand, and I'm speaking from the point of view of somebody who lives in the West, and even though I'm always trying to see what is happening globally, and what is my interest is the dynamics of processes, but actually one of the biggest questions that has always concerned me is, and maybe this is connected with the fact that I am myself coming from a small country, and not from the West. So knowing that even though I'm from a small country, this small country is producing many films, and Bulgaria now is making about 25 films every year. It is a small country of about 7 million people at the moment. Before it was like, more like 40 films every year, but typically nobody has ever seen any of Bulgarian films. So like, I came to the West, and people would normally ask me, is there such a thing as Bulgarian cinema? Do Bulgarian films exist, and so on? And of course they exist, and of course some are extremely good, and of course they're absolutely great directors. So I'm giving an example with Bulgaria, but this is essentially the attitude in the West, where people mainly have seen Hollywood films and occasionally know about American, Indie, or French cinema. They have no idea. So it is very similar, I imagine, in situation like, being a secondary state in India. So everybody knows that there is Indian cinema, but for them it is equivalent with Bollywood. But you're not in Bollywood, you're in Assam. And nonetheless, there is Assamese cinema, and I'm sure they are great films, they are great filmmakers, and so on. So this is my attitude. But the biggest question on my mind always, therefore, is how come we know of the creative efforts of some people, and the creative efforts of some people control the attention of the world, and like, many people relate to their creative efforts. In other cases, people have creative efforts, but nobody beyond their narrow environment has seen their films. Nobody knows their work. Nobody is able to appreciate their work. So this is profoundly unfair as far as I'm concerned. And this is where my scholarly interests lie. So in principle, I have always been interested in matters of distribution. So it is not, when we speak about cinema, it is not about so much what films have been made, but I'm more interested which films have been seen. And which films have been seen, if they have been seen, what are the reasons for the films to be seen? Because on the surface, we would say, maybe the best films that deserve to be seen, maybe they are seen. But as far as I'm concerned from experience, this is not the case. Many completely rubbish films are seen extremely widely, but some total masterpieces remain completely unseen. So this shows me that actually a very important conundrum lies in understanding why films circulate, how films circulate, what are the factors, why it is that some films circulate extremely widely, whereas other films do not manage to be seen beyond very narrow circuit, and so on. So my interest became focused on distribution and circulation. And it is in the context of this interest that I gradually became interested in film festivals. I had emigrated from Bulgaria, and I was living in North America. I have lived in Canada for years, and then I was working in the United States in the 90s. And then toward the end of the 90s, now more than 20 years ago, I got a job in England in a city called Leicester, which actually has very big Indian population. So I have many Indian friends from there. And only after I arrived in Leicester in the year 98, because in America, there are festivals, but the festivals are kind of like, lackluster, nothing very special. So there are several important festivals like of the type of San Francisco Film Festival, New York Film Festival, South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, where I was living in Austin, Texas, Chicago Film Festival, I was then living in Chicago. I lived in Toronto in Canada. So kind of like, they are big and respected festivals. But to my current thinking, as I have become since an important festival historian and I know the history of festivals, these are all secondary festivals. They are not the places where new cinema is discovered. They just usually go to Europe and kind of like see what European festivals are offering and then bring it to North America. So it is a flow. Very rarely, only very few of the film festivals in North America have original programming, very few. Most of the original programming is in Europe. So arriving in Europe at the end of the 90s, so 23 years now I live back in Europe. This allowed me to start seeing the work of the original festivals. I was able to start traveling to festivals, to Berlinale, to Rotterdam, various other festivals that it was possible to accommodate in my academic schedule, because when we have teaching responsibilities, we can, like for example, Cannes, I'm not also interested in Cannes, but Cannes is I'm always busy. Venice Film Festival is also awkward, but kind of like, there are festivals which were able, and I have been at this point, I have been like, really at a huge number of festivals since. So coming to Europe, it became clear that actually, unlike North America, in Europe, the festivals had a very important role for the circulation of films. Normally, even though Europe, like North America, the typical thing is that you have distributors work with cinemas, and the films, like, at least it used to be before COVID, that you'd go to cinema and you'd see the new films, or then buy them probably on DVD a few months later. It was also strictly regimented at which point you could, like, if a film is a new release, it was not allowed, for example, to have the DVD sold until a number of months later, for which I know this was quite different from India, because in India, I know that the musical track, the soundtrack is often released even before. Yes. So, sorry?
Just someone has just unmuted their audio. Just Chandan Hala, please mute your audio.
Right. So do I go on? Right.
Please go on.
So in Europe, it turned out, so like, gradually observing, I did realize that the festivals, so like, the multiple festivals that existed already by that time, the festivals were serving a role for very many films that actually were not in cinemas. So it was clearly acknowledged that there is a large number of films which do not go in commercial distribution. And up until some point, we were thinking that the festival is mainly to showcase, to provide the forum and showcase these films that actually do not find a formal distributor. The festival is showing these films. People come to the festival to see different films. And also many of the festivals also were fulfilling this commercial function, namely a film is brought to the festival and the distributor comes to the festival and sees it at the festival and contracts it. And then, like, the festival was regarded as an opportunity for the film to go into wider commercial distribution. However, studying film festivals, and of course there is this function, especially if we are talking of films that come to the festivals with big markets. In Europe, we have several festivals with very solid markets, such as Cannes Film Festival is one of the biggest. The European film market at Berlinale, Berlin Film Festival, is a huge film market. So, like, festivals actually run in parallel with film markets. And the film market is usually under-researched and under-acknowledged because the film market is not really part of the festival itself. It's a completely different thing, which runs in parallel, has parallel screenings, has often more screenings than the official screenings at the festival and so on. And this is where deals are made. So of course there is this functional festival, but there are many festivals where actually there is no opportunity to sell films, and there is nobody to offer deals to the people who participate. However, at these festivals, the programmers of other festivals come. So I will give one example. One very important festival was, and still is the festival in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, which usually takes place very early in the calendar year. Usually it is in the last 10 days of January. And very many, of course, they also have local audience, but the most important audience at Rotterdam are people who program other festivals, and they all flock to Rotterdam because Rotterdam is in January, whereas their festivals may be in May, June, September, and so on. So they all go to Rotterdam early in the year to see what films Rotterdam has found from around the world, has brought to Rotterdam, and then they start inviting these films to their own festivals. So once the film is invited to a secondary festival, then some other people see it and invite it from there. So now what we started realizing is happening is that actually a film can have a very successful career without ever going into formal distribution, just by traveling the festival circuit, because there's so many festivals that clearly, like, you know, a film can be shown hundreds of times at different festivals, even thousands of times sometimes, just by being screened at festivals. Now, this is becoming much easier with the advent of digital tools, because in the past people have had to send cans of their films to the programmers to view, and, like, you know, they can submit to 1, 2, 3 festivals. Now they can submit digitally to a number of festivals. Festivals are inundated and so on, but there are sites which carry this kind of films, like Festival Scope, you probably know it, and so on. So I'm trying to just outline very briefly how it works. So we did realize that actually the festival circuit in itself is a kind of alternative distribution mechanism which does not comply with the logic of distribution, because distribution obviously is a strictly commercial activity for the sake of profit. So, like, you know, you have a product and you want it distributed so that you can make profit, and obviously, like, you know, part of these profits is invested for further production. In the case of distribution of circulation through the festivals, it's not the same, because, like, you know, the monetary side is tricky. And kind of, like, you know, the payments are less, there is no such profitability and so on, but festivals do function as an alternative distribution. The other thing on the history of festivals I want to say is that ultimately, even though we do have film festivals all over the world, ultimately the festivals are a quintessentially European phenomenon, in my opinion. So clearly I'm very well aware of the existence of film festivals everywhere. The oldest film festival, perhaps you know, is the one in Venice, which was created in 1932. This is before World War II, by Benito Mussolini and his government, which wanted to have film put to the goals of propaganda fascist Italy at that time. Cannes Film Festival wanted to start as an alternative festival in 1939, but it could not take place because of the beginning of World War II. So they only screened one evening and then canceled it. And it was only able to establish itself as a solid festival after the war, starting in 1946. And then the third most important festival in Europe is Berlinale, Berlin International Film Festival, which started in 1951, and it started again for political reasons. It was started by Germans, but on the insistence and with assistance from the CIA and American interest in West Berlin, as a showcase against East Berlin. So this is before the division of Berlin, like, with very heavy political overtones. So these three festivals have become the biggest and most important film festivals in Europe. But in almost every European country, in the first few years after the war, you have very many other festivals which were also established. The Karlovy Vary Film Festival in the Czech Republic, San Sebastian in Spain, Locarno Film Festival in Switzerland, and so on. Like, very many. So that by around the year 1968, we probably have in existence about 40 festivals around the world, and mainly concentrated in Europe. I mentioned 1968 because in 1968, as part of general social unrest in Western Europe, there is a disruption of the festival. So there is, this would be a topic of a separate lecture, the disruption of festival at Cannes, which happened in May 1968. So this is the only time when the festival had to be shut down because there was rebellion at the festival. And Venice Film Festival was similarly affected. And the next year after that, Berlinale. So this is, end of the 60s, is considered to be a threshold in the history of the festivals. Up until that point, film festivals were an affair of cultural diplomacy. Depending on how they wanted to cultivate, how the certain state, Italy or Germany or France, wanted to cultivate relations with other countries, they had representation of the cinema of these countries. After 1968, the state stopped interfering with festivals, stopped telling festivals what to do, left them to program on their own, which seemed to be a democratic move. But this democratic move mainly benefited local directors. So like, for example, the French New Wave, because they had said they feel excluded, now they were included, other local filmmakers, but very many masterpieces actually of global cinema then started falling through the cracks because it was no longer a process of nomination by the state, and they were not feeling obliged. So for example, before 1968, the big festivals were feeling obliged to include the films from India because India certainly was a very important player at the international scene, and they acknowledged that it's an important filmmaking nation. So if you scrutinize the history of awards received by Indian cinema, you can see that the work of Satyajit Ray, the work of other important filmmakers has been awarded prior to 1968. After 1968, the participation of Indian film, it becomes an affair of private individuals. So if the programmers of this festival would know about the work of somebody in India, they may include it, but there is no systematic obligation for the festivals to ensure that India is represented at the festival, because this is no longer a cultural diplomacy enterprise. This is an enterprise, it's a matter of taste. The festival says, we present you with the best films, but the best films, in fact, are the films that the selector for this festival happens to know about. And I was reading, for example, a description on how the selector of Director's Fortnight at Cannes, who was completely not aware of any cinema in Asia, essentially, if he would include any Asian film, it would be only on personal recommendation from his friends. And I was scrutinizing, so he never, for more than 10 years, he had not included a single film from South Korea. In a period when South Korea actually had very strong cinema. A person from South Korea approached him and asked him and said, my brother is a great filmmaker and has made this great film. What do I have to pay you for you to see this film and include it in your program? And the selector at Cannes was totally outraged and said, no, I'm not doing this for money. Get away, absolutely. Don't even mention you want to bribe me and so on, which on the surface, it looks like an attempt to bribe. But in reality, he has not seen a single South Korean film. So let's assume that this film for which they wanted to bribe him was rubbish. But how can he say it was rubbish? He can say it was rubbish on the basis of seeing some other South Korean films, or maybe seeing some South Korean films and including at least one in the course of 15 years. But as a matter of fact, in the course of 15 years, he had not included a single South Korean film. So no wonder that people in South Korea start thinking that perhaps it's a matter of paying or something like this. So kind of like, this type of anecdotes we see a lot. And even though in many cases it concerns faraway cinematographies and people in different countries.
Sorry, Professor Dina, some of yes, Professor Dina, please go ahead. And sorry for the
Gone, okay.
again, Parana.
Do I? I'm happy to take comments if there is.
They have unmuted. No, yes, please go ahead. Yes, sorry
Okay.
for the interruption.
So ultimately, even though there are festivals in different places, many of the most important festivals are those that are in Europe, and because power, like they command the biggest power, and they have the most important visibility. This is why it is not that I'm not aware of other festivals, but those in Europe still continue controlling big power. And it is considered that big filmmaking countries, which actually have the ability to produce many films which they distribute commercially, that these countries do not have much interest in taking part at the festivals. Now, for example, Hollywood very rarely takes part in any of the big film festivals. They do come mainly for promotional purposes, screening out of competition, or kind of like, some gala or something like this. And they often have shown that they do not need Cannes or Berlinale or Venice, besides just for further promotion, because anyhow their films are already in cinemas. So it is believed that where there is strong commercial tradition, there is no need much of festivals. Pretty much in the West, the opinion of India is similarly like this, because India has this very strong commercial Hindi tradition, and actually India in the West is regarded as the one of the very few places which cannot be cracked by Western distributors, because Western distributors just have the ability to flood the country with Western product, mainly Hollywood product. Like, for example, living in Britain, most people have no idea of British cinema, because everything that is in cinema is mainly American films. India is the only country which has over 90% viewership. So the box office of India, over 90% is for Indian films. So it is known that Indians like Indian films and go to see Indian films. But this is also why big Indian films are not in competition at festivals, very rarely. They may screen at some of the big festivals, just kind of like, again, for further promotion out of competition and so on. I want to say something about the typology of festivals. So this is another huge topic, because all these topics are very big. It is very important to understand that, so film festival is like an event which screens films. Let's say this is what film festival is. However, if we go a little bit further, and many people make the mistake. So when I read reviews of film festivals, usually the review is, I went to this festival, it takes place in this city, on these dates, the weather was like this, the hotel, the parties, the restaurant, something like this. And then the review discusses the films which were presented at this festival. And which is, on the surface, it looks okay. But in fact, when we want to research film festival, the films is the last thing that I'm interested in. Because of course there will be films, but what I really want to see is behind the films, what are the other reasons for the festival to exist. So the festival exists to show films, but this is not the only goal. There are many goals, like, for example, from the early days, Cannes Film Festival, there is very clear understanding that actually they undertake to have such showing at films, mainly in order to promote the hotels and the restaurants which are in the city, in the small city of Cannes. for example. So the hoteliers and the restaurateurs of Cannes have very big stake in this festival because they are actually there to profit. And the same is situation in Venice, where the festival takes place in a luxurious island not far from the city. And like, there's some huge hotels, beautiful beaches, kind of like, very many businesses profit from this festival. So like, there are commercial interests. Then over years, festivals like Cannes and Venice, but also others, have become very closely connected with the fashion industries of their countries. And both France and Italy are best known for kind of luxury fashion and so on. So there are very many people and media that are interested to cover more which stars were there, what they wore, what kind of luxury items were promoted. The award is prepared by Chopin, for example, one of the biggest jewelry and watches maker, which actress wore what Gucci or Prada or like, whatever brand was promoted. And so like, the fashion industry has this type. So for example, I'm reading Financial Times newspaper. Financial Times newspaper never covers the films at Cannes Film Festival, but it always covers Cannes as a fashion and luxury industries event. And usually luxury brands, which are all traded on the stock market, very much depend on what they have managed to present on the red carpet in Cannes or Venice. So these are stakeholders that have absolutely no interest in film, but they use film for this purpose. Whereas Berlin Film Festival, I said it was started on urging from Americans, and for many years, actually, it mainly had political goals to showcase the values of the West at the forefront of the Cold War, because Berlin was a city which half of the city was Western, the other half of the city was communist. So being this in the Western part, this was a showcase of political freedoms and so on. It has been very important for us to kind of like, say that the typology of festivals, therefore, we have to see what is the specific configuration of stakeholders that are involved in a certain festival. So we always have to look at who are the sponsors, which is the organizer, who are the members of the board of this festival, kind of like, who plays what role, so who has what stakes at the festival in order to understand what actually this festival wants to achieve. So we need to go a bit further beyond actually checking out what films are being shown at these festivals. So for us, understanding stakeholders is important. On the basis of this, one of the most popular classifications is that they are audience festivals and business festivals. This was proposed by Mark Perhanson, who is a scholar who then worked for Locarno Film Festival. And this is quite a good one. And I want to say there are many typologies and categories and so on, but I will only mention 3 types, without saying that this is most important, just for you to keep in mind and maybe ask yourselves which, like, when you go to some festival, when you're involved with some festival, which type it is. So first of all, it's very important to understand that some festivals are mainly there because of the market and to cater to the industry. And this is like, most famous example is the Cannes Film Festival, which last year when COVID crisis happened, Cannes Film Festival actually did not take place, but the Cannes Film Market took place. So they had very little time to decide what they want to rescue, what is most important. So that, this is the best litmus test. What are the stakeholders at the festival? So so they were ready to abandon screenings, abandon red carpet, abandon the interest of hotels, abandon the interest of jewelry makers and so on, but they rescued the market. And they made the market very affordable in order to continue, because they had realized that if there is disruption to the market, then indeed Cannes is finished. So this is an example of where the festival mainly has market orientation. And Cannes, as a matter of fact, does not really have audience because it is extremely complex, because they have so many industry going to the festival that ordinary people almost do not exist at Cannes. There is no ordinary audience. There are the festivals that are market festivals also. Then there is the type of festival which I generally call cause-based festival. So there is some cause, some idea around this festival. And even though on the surface, again, this is a festival which screens films, the real reason for existence of the festival is some other cause. So for example, gay and lesbian film festivals, for example. So certainly it is the idea of kind of like, you know, these gender relations, like, you know, gender identity, these kind of things. The films are screened, but mainly are screened for the purpose of showing kind of like, you know, showing more about the cause which is of interest. All sorts of political festivals. So we in one of our books, we wrote about the film festival somewhere in India. Unfortunately, I can't remember where it is. Festival of Waters. So kind of like, you know, realizing how important it is the existence of water and the necessity of water. So there is a film festival around this cause. All human rights film festivals, clearly where the debate and the discussion of the film is more important. These are all cause-based festivals. And then at the end of the day, there may be cinephilia-based festivals where certain kind of cinema is presented, but I absolutely do not think that they are the most important ones. Now, because I see that time is progressing, I will skip. I wanted to speak about the festival circuit, but I will skip this and just say a few things about Indian cinema at the festivals in order to allow time for discussion. And if there are no questions, I can then go back and say things. So Indian cinema, like from where I stand, because obviously you are in India and you're in this specific state of Assam, where I don't really know how things look from there. Now, most people in the West who are not Indian and who are not connected with India, many people do not even know that there is such a huge phenomenon as Indian cinema. I think now they reach an understanding, but it is little understanding. Many programs of film do not teach Indian cinema. Even those that acknowledge that there is such Indian cinema do not know how huge and diverse Indian cinema is. Like, you know, usually Indian cinema in the West is mainly synonymous with Bollywood. And Bollywood films is what you can see in cinemas. When I lived in the city of Leicester, for example, where I said there is a significant Indian population, they were always kind of, I was able to keep up with the biggest blockbusters from India. But there was almost never any film in any of the other languages. It was only in Hindi, and they were just main commercial blockbusters. So usually people that think that Indian cinema is something like a world in its own. Sorry, I see somebody here in the yard, but I cannot go to that. I have an apple tree and had invited somebody to pick up also. So Indian cinema is a world in itself. And another reason for which many people in the West think this is because Indian cinema is so different in terms of genre from what Western cinema is like. The song and dance sequence, the fact that Indian film has can mix plots which could be tragedy, comedy, romance, these kind of things, is completely bizarre for the Western mind, because the Western mind is used to have kind of these categories completely separated. And the understanding is that they cannot be in one and the same film. So if you have a sad, tragic film, the film has to mainly have sadness and tragedy and can absolutely not have any comical elements. Whereas in an Indian film, it is completely typical that it may be a very sad film, but it could have a subplot that is comedy or romance. So if a film is a romance film, it should be only about the love affair, but not really about any other things. Whereas Indian film is mixing these genres, so the general stereotype, and of course, the Indian film is punctuated by these interruptions which have the song and dance sequences, which to Westerners are completely unusual and strange because they disrupt the narrative. So there is no place for music and dance intermissions. And of course, the other thing which many Westerners used to think about Indian cinema is that Indian films are endless, just so long, usually going over 3 hours, which I don't think is the complaint anymore because Hollywood films also became extremely long in recent years. But the reality is that most people in the West simply cannot watch and cannot handle an Indian film. They regard it as a bizarre creature, which may be interesting for somebody, but for them is very strange, and they would not normally choose to see it. I do not think it is changing, but of course we have been making efforts, specifically when I teach, and many colleagues of mine teaching to Western students, we have specifically made effort to explain that, of course, film can be very many different things, to cultivate more understanding and so on. And as a result, many people may have started watching Indian films also because now there are quite a few Indian films on Netflix and on the other platforms, so they're easy to access. But I do not think that most people in the West watch Indian films. Mainly people who are connected with India in some way, they are the viewers. And as a result of this standing of Indian film, so when I look at the history of festivals, quite a few festivals in the past have had films from Indian directors, but they are, I'm not exactly sure, do you call this parallel cinema or kind of like, it's not the commercial cinema, but they are like, different type of films from India that usually would be picked up by the festivals. It's not the commercial product. And what I see in the history of festivals is that actually they have preferred to work with specific directors. And I know the work of very many important film Indian directors that has completely escaped the festival. Like, classical example is Ritwik Ghatak's work, which his work has not been presented almost at any festival. Parthajit, you are now mentioning Adur Gopalakrishnan, for example. He was at many festivals, but he was mainly at festivals in Karlovy Vary, in Moscow, these festivals which were in the East Bloc. He has, again, not been at the biggest festivals, like, he was at Fajr Festival and so on. So many major figures of Indian cinema have actually not been appreciated by the festival circuit. And what I notice is that work of Indian filmmakers essentially has very limited possibilities to travel. So when I go in recent years to film festivals, I do see occasional Indian films included in competition. But what I see, first of all, usually films included in competition, maybe by Indian filmmaker, but either by Indian filmmaker who lives in the diaspora or who works with producers or other collaborators are from the diaspora. And in a moment, I'll give some examples. So it is very rarely to see somebody who locally made film to be able to break through and show their films. Or if I go to a film festival which is in the region, so for example, like I went to Dhaka Film Festival, and at the Dhaka Film Festival, I was able to see films from India, which I would absolutely not see anywhere else, simply because they showed kind of like, films from people, and this is where I met Bobby from Assam, and like, there were people from India from the different states. And then, however, at the same time, there is a very strong network of Indian film festivals. So there is a network of India. This is the coast-based type of festival because, like, their main cause is to showcase work from India. And we have in Britain, we have several festivals of this type, which only show films from the Indian subcontinent. In North America, I am thinking immediately of about 5 or 6 festivals of this type. In Western Europe, in different countries, they are dedicated film festivals that are showcasing work from India. And I will shut up, just want to give examples of films that I have recently seen and kind of like, realize that they are successful and tell you how I believe they have traveled. So for example, on Facebook, I have befriended, and I don't remember how I befriended this person, a young man, Tagata Ghosh, who is in Kolkata, who is making short films, and he had made a film called Miss Man. So, which is a short and like, it is a pacifist, maybe gay topic, but short, kind of like, it is quite a quality film. But at first I didn't know anything about the film. I was just seeing very systematically, he was posting like, he has this effective title, Miss Man, like, Miss Man is selected for this festival, Miss Man is selected for this festival. And at the beginning, these posts were like, always about some festivals which I have absolutely no idea where they are. So he started absolutely with some small festivals in India. Then for first time, it was selected at the festival abroad, like, and abroad meant in Bangladesh, maybe. Then from Bangladesh, obviously somebody saw it in Bangladesh and it was picked for Turkey. Then from Turkey, it was picked for Germany. Then from Germany, it was picked for some secondary festival in America. Then from secondary festival in America, it was picked for some primary festival in America, and then came to Europe and so on. So at the moment, I think that this man, Miss Man, has been at more than 100 festivals. So it has been quite well seen international. Yes, and recently he told me, because at some point I got interested, I said, like, please let me see this film. Because why would I ask to see a film? Like, I'm always inundated by far too many requests and so on. But I volunteered to see it, and I also thought that it was a very, very good film. And most recently, I know that it has been purchased by Air Canada Airlines or something like this, so people who are on the airline can see it. And so this is kind of like, so he doesn't get into proper distribution, but of course, it does travel quite well. And now his second film, which is yet another short, is going through the same circuit. So this is one example of somebody who very systematically, I think mainly through Facebook, I have to ask him to consider to describe how actually, maybe to write a piece to show how he promoted this film. So this is one example. Here I have other short examples. I was on the jury of Busan Film Festival in 2014, and like I served with famous Bong Joon-ho at that time, who was not as famous at that time, but still he was quite famous in Korea already. And one of the films that we had to see included in competition was an Indian film. I cannot remember the name of the filmmaker. However, so it was an Indian film included from India, but it was actually a French co-production. And even though it was set in India, it looked completely as a French film from the 1950s. The whole aesthetics of this film was kind of like also French cinema made in India. And it was actually a very high quality film, but ultimately it was somehow culturally displaced. I did not produce, so we couldn't give it an award because kind of it mimicked as an Indian film, but in fact it looked more like French film set in India. Other films which I have seen, so this year, the Indian film that has probably made the greatest impression on me is a Malayalam film called The Great Indian Kitchen or something like this. Do you know this one? Great Indian Kitchen, which is on one of the platforms, either on Netflix or on Amazon Prime or something like this. And again, last year I saw a film, Jalakayatu or something.
Malayalam film, yeah.
Yes, which I really loved. So this was not
Last
in
was
the
very,
first.
very significant. The last six
I
months of
think-
film. Yeah.
Yes, this was not at the film festival, but something like a film season in Britain. Channel 4 is making every year there is a season of Indian films, so it is like a mini television festival of Indian films, and they are trying to include this kind of more diverse work. So these are films that have been seen. Then I was juror at Yamagata Documentary Festival in Japan, which is a documentary, most important in Asia for documentary cinema. And this had a film. It has a sub-competition which is called Asian Currents. I was on the international jury with my friend Indian cinematographer Ranjan Palit. So this was great experience. But the other section, we were not jurors on this. The section on Asian films was won by these Indian filmmakers from Pondicherry, the friends who I eventually visited with, who had made film about agricultural life in Nagaland. And they're actually theater people. They had no experience in filmmaking, and yet they received the biggest award. How exactly they were selected, I don't know. I know that eventually they also received awards in India, but they have told me that if it was not for the award in Japan, which they were completely surprised when they received it. So if it was not for this award, probably nobody in India would pay any attention to their work. I don't know if it's true, but this was their opinion. And one last example I want to give is with another person I became friends with, Delhi-based young documentary filmmaker Rahul Jain. Some years ago, again, I was on the jury of a documentary film festival in Greece, in Thessaloniki, and I was very impressed by a documentary film made by Rahul, who I didn't know at that time, called Machines, which was about a fabric factory in Gujarat, present day, but it was kind of like, very aesthetically beautiful, but at the same time politically very truthful film about the class division, about poor people and so on. And we were very impressed. We were international jury, and we gave it the main award to Machines. And eventually when I went to the festival in Japan, I met Rahul, and I see that he's actually a very young Indian man who was, I think he was about 25 years at the time. But he was one of these Indians that I know many of this kind, who comes from a very well-off family, and half of his life already he had lived in America. So even though he's Indian, all his contacts and collaborators are international. And most importantly, his producer is a famous documentary producer who is based in Finland. And after this success, many people said, okay, so Rahul has made one important film, but it is more important to see if he's able to make more films, because it may be a one-off wonder. So let's see what second film he will make. And now he finally managed to make a second film, which is about the pollution of the air in Delhi. And I know this is like, a film that he cares very much about. And the film was selected at Cannes Film Festival. There is a small program now, new program at Cannes about ecological cinema. So films that care about serious climate change problems and so on. So Rahul's film was at Cannes. So when we look at his career, obviously the first film was awarded at Documentary Festival, and the second film was already at Cannes. Now, question is, however, and I have not seen it, so I cannot say about the real film. So question is, was the film at Cannes because it is really the best of all films, or it was at Cannes due to connections and due to the fact that kind of like, he's already part of the circuit, due to the fact that he has a powerful producer who is well known, due to the network that festivals have helped him create. So I think the answer is always like, if the film was rubbish, it wouldn't be. So I suppose that the real answer is, this is a good film, but the reason for which it is at Cannes is not because the film is good, because there are many other good films. It is because the availability of connections and acquaintances and so on, and networks, which the festivals have. So going to festivals creates these networks. So I thought that these experiences are enough, and I am shutting up now to kind of answer questions or give you comments that maybe are more of your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor DINA, for your lovely speech. I think some of the participants must have some questions, but I like to put, before handing them the questions, because I just do agree with you that when you talk about that in the West, Indian cinema is the synonymous of the Bollywood. In the West, they understand the meaning of the Bollywood. But what happened? The filmmakers like Satyajit Ray, as you have mentioned, and then you have mentioned about Adur Gopalakrishnans. Then we have some other filmmakers who are making some socially and culturally some meaningful cinemas. So they have rejected the word Bollywood. They want to say that Indian cinema is not about the Bollywood. Indian cinema is about the cinema that is made in different languages. So I totally agree with you. So I like to request Sanjeevani Baruah. She's a young aspiring filmmaker. She had one question. She has just text me. Yes, over to Sanjeevani Baruah.
And I would like to see some faces, please. Yes, hi.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm Sanjeevani, an aspiring filmmaker. I would like to know how can our films attract the attention to the film curators, because we can see that in the prestigious film festivals like Venice Film Festival or Cannes Film Festival or Berlin Film Festival, the known filmmakers films get selected, but we can see that the young aspiring filmmakers or the young filmmakers, debutant filmmakers, don't find space. So can you please enlighten us about this?
Unfortunately, I have got no answer. I'm afraid this is the most difficult questions. And the only thing, and I see many people like you who ask me similar questions, and I do not know, because I can only tell you what the life of these selectors is like, because nowadays film festivals are trying, especially the bigger festivals, are not commissioning just from friends, but they are trying to view the submissions which they solicit. The issue is that they are receiving so many submissions that it is absolutely impossible what they do with this pool of submissions. So really, in my opinion, it's just a matter of sheer chance. I was on the board of Edinburgh Film Festival, which is not a particularly, historically is important, but not. So I can tell you that Edinburgh Film Festivals in the past 10 years, they receive for each festival about 3,000 submissions. And out of these 3,000 submissions, they select about 10 at the end. And this is like, you know, not even one of the most important festivals. And of course, if you are a programmer for this festival, there is no way for you to see the 3,000 submissions. So the programmers are working with a team of people who are called viewers usually, each one of who is seeing. So like, you know, if you have 3,000 submissions, you need a team of 30 people who will see these films, and each one of them will report on the films that they saw. And they can only recommend 2 of these films. So you can, but this is because the platforms now make it possible for you. So if you have a film, in the past you'd submit to 1, 2, 3 festivals, but now you have submitted to 30 festivals. And each one of these 30 film festivals is taking the obligations to see your film. So hopefully somebody will see it and recommend it. And from what I know, festivals do in fact watch these submissions. Question is that if the festival at the end has 100 films included, 70 films are included in different ways. So some films are included, programmed from other festivals. Some films are included because they are local films, and like for whatever other reason, which are all legitimate reasons. And only 30 of the films out of 3,000 are included to open call for submission. So in my opinion, the best bet is for you to start first submitting to local festivals, or to festivals where it is more likely to figure out where is the likelihood for your film to be selected, and make sure that it is selected at least in these places. and then build it up gradually from there. What I saw happen with Miss Man, which I gave the example, and then essentially, like, develop connections. And I wanted to give another example. Let me see. I cannot remember. I'm sorry. Yes, I used to work with a young Italian man. He had come here to work as my assistant. Then we realized that it is not possible because he had taken a job here, but he also had a job as a screener for short films at Venice Film Festival. And like, we said, like, you cannot have two jobs. And he said, no, of course I can have two jobs because Venice is not all the year. It is only in the season before the festival. And then when the job came, we realized that it was absolutely impossible because it turned out that he was one of team of 15 people, and each one of these 15 people for Venice Film Festival has to see 2,000 short films. So this was his personal assignment, is 2,000 short films, which kind of sounds big, but you don't know how to react. But when we calculated what it means, so essentially he has to see the film and he has to write an opinion of 2 sentences because there is no time for more. Short film is everything between 1 and 30 minutes. Short film, I have been on juries of short film festivals. Actually, short film is extremely difficult and tiresome to watch because it is short, so it doesn't take lots of your time, but it doesn't mean that for 1 hour you can see 10 short films because it engages you and kind of like, wants you to think, and it is extremely, extremely tiresome. So when we did calculation, it turned out that my colleague, there was absolutely no way for him to hold 2 jobs because every day he had to work for 12 hours in order to be able to see these films and like, just to give an opinion for the people who really make decisions. So this is the reality at the end of the festivals. I think that actually most of the people who are watching are very well intended. Just the reality, the sheer volume is extremely difficult. So I don't know if this is of any help, Sanjrani.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have another participants, Abhishek Barthakur. Yes, please go ahead and just switch on your video and we'll go ahead with that.
Good evening, Professor Dina. This is
Hi.
Abhishek Barthakur this side. Just one question for you, ma'am. As an aspiring filmmaker, what is the procedure to send movies for international film festivals? Is there any standard operating or process, something which we have to follow?
Sorry, the sound was not very good, so I'm not sure if I understood exactly.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to speak once more. As an aspiring filmmaker, what is the procedure to send movies to the major film festivals?
Now the best procedure is to know somebody and submit the film to real people. This is, but how you know somebody, I don't know. So like, to know somebody means in India, go to the film festivals which are within your reach, where you can meet people individually who are probably in decision-making positions. So I know festival in Kolkata, in Trivandrum, in Delhi, kind of like, I don't know what festivals do you have in Assam, really, I have no idea, I want to know, but you have to tell me eventually. And kind of like, try to build relationships because the film is your own product. So kind of like, show your face because otherwise your film is just a title, it's just a file. So kind of like, if this title and file is linked to an individual, this is probably the biggest step you can take, speaking from experience here, because otherwise what you have to do, you probably know better than me. I mean, there is Film Freeway, there are many other platforms. Every festival is using Without a Box or whatever they're using. And I don't want to say that festivals are abusing these kind of like, free submission. So they're kind of like, it's not a genuine thing. There is no bad will, but kind of like, these calls that we are receiving material and like, you're uploading your film and you're thinking that something is happening. No, don't fool yourself. Not something is happening, but it is not very much what is happening. So essentially, like, rather than uploading to this festival and to this festival and to this festival, try to kind of build some personal relationships, because so festivals are receiving these submissions, they're watching them, but the majority of submissions they simply cannot schedule. And they're watching them because you have paid them a fee, even if the fee is not very big. Many festivals do not have very big budgets. So when they receive 3 to 5,000 films, even with the small fee, all of a sudden this income becomes like, a very good additional income for them. So this is why they keep it. And of course, they fulfill what they have said to see. They have all they have promised is that your film will be seen, and maybe it may be included. But the proportion of the probability that after being seen, your film is actually included at the festival, and even if it's included in the festival, it may not go much further. So if this is of any help.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
One other thing I want to add in principle, because I have been approached through friends. So, for example, when I was on the jury of the festival in Busan, which is the biggest one in Asia, one of the other jurors was Suhasini Maniratnam, who is a well-known actress and like, a friend. So one day somebody calls me who comes through recommendation through Suhasini, who has made the film. He's an actor from Chennai. I eventually had the chance to meet him and so on. And he asked me to help, like, with the film that they have made. And in this instance, I just watched the trailer because, like, I simply physically cannot see so many films as people are asking me to see. And she had remembered that I had said that, in my opinion, one of the best Indian films of the decade is The Gangs of Wasseypur, which I think it's a total masterpiece. This is an example of a film which has completely escaped the festival circuit because it has been at festivals, and nonetheless it has remained unnoticed and underappreciated, even though, like, obviously it is. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, a masterpiece. So this guy asked me to watch his trailer, and already from the trailer I can see that his is not an art house film. It is good, but it is Indian, and there is nothing wrong with the film, but because it's Indian, there is this unacknowledged prejudice, kind of like an impossibility for the Western programmer to appreciate a typical Indian film, which does have all these genre quirks, and it has all this dance and song numbers. So it is not made to the Western narrative standard, and therefore, even if it is a good film, I said, like, just don't waste your time, only submit it to Indian film festivals. And this is what he did, and it became relatively successful on the Indian circuit. But if it is too Indian, just like, acknowledge there is nothing wrong for a film to be Indian. There is no need to push through doors which are closed anyhow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, one of you had a question?
Yes, yes, sir. Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
It was really a wonderful lecture. It was so energetically you presented. It was nice listening to you. But I have two queries actually. You have query number one. You have mentioned about different typologies of film festivals. Do you think film festivals should focus on a cause and particular kind of films and not include too many diverse genres? And query number two, what is your opinion on online film festivals and online curated films streaming services like Movie and Movie Saints, which focuses on alternative films? These are the
Yes.
two queries, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So if I remember, I have very short memory these days. So first question is, if film should focus, if film festival should focus on cause.
Yeah. Not include too many genres, diverse genres.
It depends. It depends how the film festival, because there are all sorts of film festivals, and as I said, by the year 1968, in my opinion, there were probably no more than 50 film festivals around the world. Today, nobody can say how many festivals there are. Definitely more than 7,000, but more like 10,000 film festivals exist in the world today. So like, it is an enormous variety. I personally find the so-called cause-based film festivals more interesting. So if you ask me, because I like to see the film, but I also like to have a discussion. So for example, I have been interested, there is a number of food film festivals, for example, and we did some research recently on film festivals in Italy, which are promoting slow food, some other festivals which are kind of dedicated to French food or to Asian food or something like this. This is one topic, for example. There is fashion film festival, so essentially like-minded people. I'm always interested in political documentary. So I'm hugely interested in documentary film festivals, for example. So this is one kind. And my personal preference is for this, but I cannot tell the festivals what to do. Next, at the end of this month, I am going to Greece, and actually I will be on the jury for first time in Athens. For 2 years, I have not been on any live jury. So earlier this year, I was on the jury of Fajr Film Festival in Tehran. But now, for first time in 2 years, I'll be on live jury in Athens Film Festival. Now, Athens Film Festival is not the most important festival in Greece. It's Thessaloniki is a much more important festival, international, but Athens is a film festival. When I looked at the program and also at the competition, I see it is a completely hodgepodge. What they have on the program is all the films that have won at other big festivals. So because I have not been at Cannes, I'll be able to see the films that were at Cannes. I am not at Venice, but they will have the films from Venice. And essentially, it is kind of like a survey type of festival. So not my favorite kind, but they should exist too, because people who live in Athens want to see these films. So there is place for everybody under the sun, so to say. Your second question was about the platforms. Now, this is what I skipped from the notes that I have prepared here. Because, of course, what is happening nowadays, COVID or no COVID, so certainly COVID precipitated and made certain trends faster, but these trends were there anyhow, and sooner or later they would come, and clearly we have this incredible growth of platforms. So you're mentioning Mubi, and I admit I have no idea what is Movie Saints. You have to tell me what it is. But let me answer. Living in the West, so for example, I have on my television, because I no longer have television, actually I only have apps on the television. And I have one app for Mubi, one app for Amazon Prime, one app for Netflix. And of course I could have a number, I have a few more, but you can have many more, but the question is how many you can see. So I mentioned these three because these are the three usually that I use. Then I watch Indian films. I watch on the app for Channel 4 because Channel 4 is the only one that has interesting selection. And I admit I totally find amazing material that I want to see on YouTube. So I very often on my television just go and they're old films. I was able to see several films by Mrinal Sen, which are only on YouTube, and there is no other way to see them. So this kind of historical treasures. And so if you want to see Bulgarian films, I can make a recommendation from YouTube. You can see it everywhere for free. So this is the reality of and I'm sure that in India you have access to other services and platforms and so on. And then there are the film festivals, which used to be live, but when COVID came, all festivals kind of rushed to think of some alternative model because it was a matter of survival. So there was this combination of festivals that actually did one World Film Festival last year, which was on YouTube. This was very weak attempt. All the festivals went for some hybrid models, moved online and so on. So all the festivals also came online. Then another thing which happened during COVID is, at least probably at your end, but at my end, in my email inbox, every day I have announcement. Hungarian Film Archive has opened this treasure, they're available online, whatever. Lithuanian films you can see now for these 5 days. From Taiwan, you can see this ecological documentary. So, like, you know, and this is, I have done a book about cinemas of Paris. This is something like as if I'm sitting at my Scottish village home, but I feel as if I'm in the center of Paris, where you think, like, you know, where to dash first and what to see and so on. Like, you know, there is such cornucopia, so much, it is absolutely unbelievable. But at the same time, you can only view this many hours. I mean, I have other things to do, and, like, you know, I enjoy other things. I cannot just watch. So all of a sudden, there was such absolutely overwhelming abundance, and the festivals entered direct competition with the platforms. So essentially, I have, and in fact, I watched the whatever it's called, this organization, the Indian Cinema Club Societies or something like this, several times, did some very interesting presentations. I remember I attended a mini film festival of the work of Aparna Sen, who I had not seen her films, but now I was able to see as part of this mini festival and so on. But what is the essence of viewing? The viewing experience actually is something which at the end of the day I got overwhelmed about, because if I'm watching from Cannes Film Festival or from Kerala or from Taiwan or from Mubi or from Netflix, I am always sitting here at home watching on the same screen. And, like, you know, and when I'm talking to people, today is in Assam, tomorrow I have a conversation in Berlin, I see the same computer screen with, like, you know, the same black boxes with names of people and, like, you know, a few friendly faces. And, like, you know, this is not life. Absolutely. So, like, you know, I really dislike this. And, like, you know, losing the liveness of film festivals has been very unpleasant. And for me, it is so on the basis of this, I have excluded actually from my life Netflix, because on assessing which platform has material that I'm mainly interested in, I discovered that actually Netflix offer on the whole is most mediocre. And, like, you know, of course there are some good films, and, like, you know, so once a year I take a subscription for a month and I watch quickly what I want to watch on Netflix. And Netflix carries a very interesting film, which was at Venice Film Festival, unappreciated film called The Disciple, I think it's called. This was probably very impressive, but, like, you know, it doesn't have too many things. Mubi is a platform which I really, really like. Even more because I have made sure that we cover Mubi in various books I have done over the years. We had interviews with the founder, who is from Turkey, you probably know, these kind of things about their curation model and so on. But Mubi, besides other things, one thing which Mubi has done, even for me, and I am kind of, like, you know, really I have seen far too many things by now, is that they pay proper attention to the work of women filmmakers. So at any moment, if you see what is on offer at Mubi, of the 30 films which are on offer, at least 10 films will be by female filmmakers, be it from the history of cinema, be it contemporary films, because of course women have always made films, but festivals unfortunately have managed to ignore their work quite a bit over the years. So Mubi are actually doing compensatory work and bringing these very important films. So really, I think very highly of Mubi. But I think that the festivals are in competition directly with the platforms. And unfortunately, I think the festivals are losing this competition. Because if I am to choose to go see something on Mubi, which is already curated, which means others have already seen it and appreciated it. And if they put it forward, there is more likelihood that it is something worth to see. And if there is an offer from Film Festival, I am not sure about this film which the festival is offering. Can I waste my precious 2 hours for something which is not really worth it? Maybe I would go for the safer offer of Mubi. So kind of, I think many people have this thought process, and this is why I say festivals have to return to life, because the liveness of the festival is very important, the discussion, these kind of things.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us. It was a beautiful presentation. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anup. So COVID-19 pandemic has completely changed our lifestyle, but at the same
Also,
time, yeah, at the same time, we must thank to COVID-19 pandemic, because of that, it has become a blessing of disguise, blessing in its disguise, that we
yes,
have
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is due to this that we are meeting today. So yes, of course, I acknowledge this. So I see that actually time has quite advanced. I can probably, if there is one more question, and if not, maybe we should wrap up so that
that's I'm supposed to say, because it is almost, we have left 1 minute. So one of the participants will offer the vote of thanks. Then we'll officially, after vote of thanks, we'll officially close the sessions. So it will be almost 90 minutes as we have the schedule. Yes.
perfection.
Perfect. Perfect timing. Okay, cinematic timing. And over to Sanjivani Bora. She is an aspiring filmmaker. She will offer the vote of thanks. Over to Sanjivani Bora.
What an incredible session it was. My heartiest thanks to our respectable resource person, Professor Dina, for this wonderful session. And I'm sure it will be highly beneficial to all the young filmmakers. I would like to thank Professor Anup Kumar Das for his welcome speech, and Parthajit Baruah sir for beautifully moderating the session. I would also like to thank Sunlit Studio Film Club for organizing such a wonderful session and providing me this opportunity. And lastly, I will like to thank all the participants for making this session a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjivani, and thank you very much for the invitation. This was a real pleasure, and I hope I may have said something of interest.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dina, and it was really our pleasure that you have given your time out of your busy schedule. And
let's hope we meet in real life.
Yes, in real life. Yeah, that's right. And
yes.
now I officially say that the session has come to an end. Namaskar.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, ma'am. Bye-bye.